My name is Linda. I am 55 years old. For most of my life, I have lived for one person only, my son Michael. His father died when Michael was just a boy. From that moment on, I became both mother and father. I worked long hours, sometimes two jobs at once. I skipped meals so he could eat. I gave up on remarrying because I wanted him to have all my time and attention. People told me I was strong, but I knew it was just love, the kind of love that makes you keep going, even when you are exhausted and broken inside. Michael was everything to me. When he graduated high school and then college, I sat in the crowd with tears in my eyes. I thought to myself that every sleepless night was worth it. Every sacrifice meant something. And when he told me one day that he had met the woman he wanted to marry, my heart swelled with pride. I thought this was the moment I had been waiting for, the day my son would build his own family. I believed I would finally see the reward for all the years I carried the weight alone. I dreamed of his wedding like every mother does. I pictured walking in with my head held high. I imagined being welcomed with love, sitting in the front row as the mother of the groom, the one who had been there through every storm. I thought my role would be respected, honored, celebrated. I even bought a new dress months ahead. I wrapped a gift with care. I prayed for his happiness and peace. But when the day finally came, everything I imagined was torn apart. Instead of honor, there was humiliation. Instead of love, there was coldness. Instead of respect, there was betrayal. From the moment I walked into that wedding hall, I knew something was wrong. The bride's family filled the front rows, laughing and chatting like they owned the place. And when I asked where I should sit, I was led to a lonely chair in the back, far from my son, far from the family I thought I had. I tried to smile. I tried to hide my pain. But every whisper, every stare, every laugh that excluded me cut deeper and deeper. I sat there feeling smaller than I had ever felt. The boy I raised, the man I gave my life for, was up there starting a new chapter, and I was treated like I was nothing more than an outsider. My heart ached with every second. I wanted to leave, but I stayed. I wanted to cry, but I held it in. I told myself I could endure it, but the truth is, I felt like I was breaking apart. And then, when I thought I could not take one more moment of shame, a man I had never met before slid into the seat beside me. He leaned closer and whispered, "Act like you are with me." And in that moment, everything began to change. I woke up that morning with a mixture of nerves and excitement. My son's wedding day was finally here. I had imagined this moment for years, and I wanted everything to be perfect. I had laid out my dress the night before, pressed and neat, the color soft and elegant. I wanted to look like the proud mother of the groom. I slipped it on, carefully, looked at myself in the mirror, and told myself that this was a day of joy. I thought of Michael as a little boy, running around in the yard, his laughter filling the house, and I felt a wave of love and pride wash over me. I carried the gift I had wrapped days earlier. The ribbon was tied neatly. It was not just a box. It was a piece of my heart, filled with love and blessings for my son and his new wife. I imagined the moment they would open it. Maybe smile, maybe even remember that his mother had thought of every detail. I smiled to myself as I walked to the car. I whispered a small prayer, asking God to bless this day, to keep my son happy, to let me share in his joy. When I arrived at the wedding venue, the parking lot was already full. Cars lined the spaces, and people in elegant clothes walked quickly toward the entrance. My heart beat fast. I felt proud. I thought to myself, today is the day everyone will see that all my sacrifices were worth it. I straightened my shoulders, held the gift tightly in my hands, and walked inside. But the moment I stepped through the doors, something shifted. The warmth I had imagined was not there. No one rushed up to greet me. No one smiled with the joy I expected. Instead, I felt eyes on me, cold stares, murmurs behind hands. My steps slowed, confusion rising in my chest. I tried to shake it off, telling myself I was imagining it, but the air felt heavy. The whispers were not friendly. I looked around, searching for Michael. I thought he would see me and run over, maybe hug me, maybe say, "Mom, you are here? Come sit with me." But I did not see him. Instead, I saw the bride's family gathered in groups. They were laughing, talking loudly, filling the space with their presence as if they owned it. I tried to smile as I walked past them, but their eyes slid over me, like I was not important enough to notice. My stomach tightened. Something felt wrong. I approached one of the ushers, a young man in a neat suit. I held my gift close and asked politely where the mother of the groom was supposed to sit. He looked at me for a moment, his expression blank, and then he gestured toward the back of the hall. The back. I blinked, waiting for him to correct himself. I thought maybe he misunderstood, but he pointed again. "Over there," he said flatly. My throat tightened. I swallowed hard, my hands trembling slightly as I clutched the gift. I walked slowly to the spot he had shown me. It was not the front row. It was not even the middle. It was a single chair set apart from the others. I stared at it, my heart pounding. My mind screamed, "This cannot be right. This cannot be my place. I am his mother." But the truth was clear. That was where they wanted me, away from the family, away from the pride and honor I thought I would feel today. I sat down, my dress smooth against the cold chair, the gift resting in my lap. I tried to hold my head high, to act like it did not matter. But every second I sat there, I felt smaller and smaller. I could hear the laughter from the front rows, the joy I was not a part of. My chest ached, my eyes burned. I forced myself to blink back the tears because I would not let them see me break. And then, from the distance, I heard my son's voice. He was laughing. I leaned forward, desperate to see him. When I caught sight of him, my heart squeezed. He looked handsome in his suit, standing tall. For a moment, pride flickered inside me. But then I saw something else. He was laughing with his new family, his wife at his side. And he did not look my way. Not once. It felt like a knife twisting inside me. My own son, the boy I had given my life for, was standing a few steps away, and yet I had never felt so far from him. I whispered to myself, "Stay calm, Linda. Just stay calm." But inside, I could feel the cracks forming. As I sat there alone, the whispers around me grew louder. I caught pieces of words, people wondering why the groom's mother was sitting in the back, wondering if there was something wrong with me, wondering what story had been told about me. I clenched my hands in my lap, nails digging into my palm, trying to steady myself, and that was when it hit me with full force. This was not an accident. This was not a mistake. This was deliberate. Someone wanted me humiliated. Someone wanted me to feel invisible. I sat frozen, the sound of laughter and music filling the hall, my heart breaking quietly in the middle of all that celebration. I did not know it yet, but this was only the beginning of my humiliation. I sat stiff in my chair, still hoping that maybe someone would come over. Maybe an usher had made a mistake. Maybe my son would notice and wave me forward. But instead, I watched as the front rows filled quickly. The bride's family arrived in groups, talking loudly, their clothes bright, their smiles wide. They moved with confidence, like the seats at the front had been waiting for them all along. I saw the bride's mother take her place in the very first row, her head held high, her dress sparkling under the lights. She was surrounded by cousins, aunts, uncles, people who seemed to appear out of nowhere, all of them laughing and greeting each other warmly. I could hear the sound of their joy, a joy that excluded me completely. Each new person who came in was guided past me. I sat with my gift on my lap, watching them walk by without so much as a glance in my direction. The ushers smiled at them, bowed slightly, and led them closer to the front. But when they passed me, their expressions cooled, their steps hurried as though I were invisible. I shifted in my seat, pressing my hands against the gift box to keep them from trembling. My chest was tight, each breath shallow. I wanted to believe it was only temporary, that maybe there would be a moment when someone realized, when someone said, "The groom's mother belongs in the front. She deserves honor today." But no one said it. The front rows were now crowded. Children bounced excitedly in their seats. Women adjusted their shawls. Men clapped each other on the shoulders. They filled the air with life and importance, their voices loud, their presence powerful. And all the while, I sat further back, small and forgotten. I looked at the distance between us, between me and my son. The space stretched like a wall. My heart sank with every laugh that floated toward me, every glance that slid past me. It was not just that I was seated in the back. It was the message, clear and sharp. I was not wanted at the center of his big day. I held my head high, refusing to bow to the humiliation. But inside, my heart was breaking. My son's wedding was supposed to be the happiest day of my life, and instead, it was becoming the loneliest. The usher did not even look me in the eye as he pointed toward the side of the hall. His hand moved quickly, almost impatiently, as if I were nothing more than a guest who had wandered in by mistake. I followed his gesture, carrying the gift in my arms, my steps slow, my chest heavy. When I reached the spot he indicated, I stopped and looked down. It was a single chair, small and lonely, pressed against the wall in the far corner. The hall was wide and beautiful, decorated with flowers and white ribbons. Every seat in the front glowed with pride and belonging. But my chair stood alone, like an afterthought, a place for someone who did not matter. I lowered myself into it carefully, clutching the gift tightly on my lap, my fingers gripping the wrapping so hard I thought it might tear. I tried to smile, tried to lift my chin and act as if it did not hurt. I wanted to believe that I could carry myself with dignity, that I could pretend the whispers and glances did not touch me. But the sound of laughter cut through the air, sharp as a knife, and I knew some of it was directed at me. I could feel it in the way people's eyes slid toward me and then away quickly, in the way a group of women near the aisle leaned their heads close together, speaking in low tones, their lips curling as they looked in my direction. I straightened my back and forced my lips into a thin smile, though my heart was breaking inside. My chest ached, my throat burned, but I would not give them the satisfaction of seeing my tears. I had promised myself that today would be about my son, that no matter what happened, I would not cause a scene. I would not give anyone a reason to say his mother ruined the wedding. So I sat still, my smile frozen, my eyes fixed on the stage where my son would soon stand. But no matter how I tried to focus forward, I could not block out the truth. I was alone, completely alone. The chair beneath me felt hard and cold. The space around me was empty, like an invisible line had been drawn to keep me apart from the rest of the room. No one came near. No one spoke to me, and the whispers continued, soft but sharp, pricking at me from every corner. I thought of the years I had dreamed of this day, the nights I had imagined sitting proudly at the front, surrounded by family, watching my son begin his new life. I thought of the sacrifices I'd made to raise him, the long nights, the lonely mornings, the prayers whispered when no one else was listening. And now, here I was, cast aside as though I were nothing. I folded my hands over the gift and closed my eyes for a moment. I told myself to breathe, to stay calm, to endure. This was his day, not mine. And yet the sting of being unwanted cut deeper than I could ever have prepared for. The music began to play softly, the hall filling with anticipation and joy. But I sat in my lonely chair in the corner, my heart aching with every note, feeling like a stranger at my own son's wedding. As I sat in that lonely chair, pressed into the corner where no one wanted me to be seen, my mind began to wander. I could not stop it. Memories came flooding back, rushing in with the same force as a wave that drags a person under. I thought of the day my husband passed away, leaving me with a little boy to raise on my own. I remembered holding my son in my arms, his tiny face pressed against my chest, and whispering to him that no matter what happened, I would always be there for him. I was scared and alone, but I made a promise that I would never let him feel abandoned. The years that followed were not easy. I worked 2 jobs, sometimes 3. There were nights I barely slept, dragging myself out of bed before dawn to prepare breakfast, walking him to school, then hurrying to work. I remember nights when he would cry because his classmates had fathers to take them to events, while I stood alone at the school gate, trying to smile through my exhaustion. I never remarried, though I had offers, because I was afraid someone else might not treat my son the way I did. My whole life revolved around him. I remembered the times I could not afford new clothes for myself because I had to make sure he had what he needed for school. I remembered skipping meals so he could eat. I remembered sitting in the dark some nights when the bills were too much, holding him close and telling him stories so he would not notice the silence in the room. And I remembered the promises he made to me. As a boy, he would hug me tightly and say, "Mom, when I grow up, I'll take care of you. You'll never be alone. I'll always stand by you." Those words kept me going in nights when I wanted to give up, when the weight of the world pressed too hard on my shoulders. Yet here I was, sitting at his wedding, pushed aside, treated like a burden, while his new family filled the front rows with pride and laughter. My son, the boy who once clung to me for comfort, stood silent as his wife's family took control. He did not speak up for me. He did not defend me. He let me sit alone, watching the life I built with my sacrifices become a place where I no longer belonged. The pain was deep, deeper than words could carry. It was not just about the chair in the corner. It was about everything it represented. Years of sacrifice, years of love, years of hope. And now, a silence from him that cut through me sharper than any insult. I pressed my hand against my chest, trying to steady my heart, trying to keep my tears from falling. I wanted to be strong, but inside, I felt a wound that would not heal. The humiliation of that moment was not just public. It was personal. It was a betrayal that went to the core of everything I had given. Still, I whispered to myself that I would not let this break me. I would not let anyone see me crumble. I told myself that my story was not over, that there was still more ahead, even if I did not yet know what it was. If you understand this kind of pain, if you have ever been overlooked or cast aside by the very people you gave everything for, please like this story, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe for more. And tell me in the comments, have you ever given your all to someone only to feel forgotten in the moment that should have mattered most? Your words matter, your story matters, and together we remind each other that love, even when unrecognized, never loses its power. I sat there in that lonely chair, clutching my small purse in my lap, pretending to fix the ribbon on the gift I had brought. But I could feel it, every glance, every stare, every whisper that rolled through the room like smoke. I could hear them, even when they tried to lower their voices, because whispers have a way of cutting sharper than shouts when you are the one being talked about. Some people looked at me with pity, their eyes soft, as if they wanted to say something kind, but never dared. Others looked at me with curiosity, trying to figure out who I was, or why I was sitting alone, tucked away in the corner like I did not belong to anyone at all. Then came the one that broke me the most. A woman leaned toward her friend and whispered loudly enough for me to hear, "Why is the groom's mother sitting by herself?" My cheeks burned instantly, the heat rising all the way to my ears, and I wanted the ground to open up and swallow me whole. I wanted to disappear, to fade into the walls, to become invisible. I tried to force a smile, pretending not to notice, pretending that I did not hear her words, but they sank into me, heavy, unshakable. I thought of how many years I had been both mother and father to my son, how many times I had walked proudly into school events, never caring what others thought, because I knew I was enough for him. But in this moment, sitting in a corner like a forgotten guest, the whispers stripped me of my dignity. It was as though all my sacrifices were invisible, erased, dismissed by strangers who did not know me, did not know my story, did not know that I had bled and sweated to raise the very man they were celebrating. I glanced toward the front rows where his bride's family sat, laughing, loudly, taking photos, basking in their importance. Not one empty chair among them, all filled with relatives, friends, neighbors, people who were treated like they belonged at the heart of the celebration. And me, the mother who gave everything, was hidden in plain sight. A man at the next table gave me a small, sympathetic smile, but it only made me feel worse, because pity was not what I wanted. I wanted recognition. I wanted acknowledgement. I wanted to be seen by my son, not pitied by strangers who could only guess at why I was being treated this way. Then another whisper came, sharper, harsher. A young woman in a pastel dress leaned into her friend and said, "Maybe there's a reason she's alone. Maybe they don't want her near them." My chest tightened, my breath caught, and I could not stop my eyes from stinging. I turned my face away quickly, pretending to adjust my shawl, but the words echoed in my head, louder and louder, as if the whole room was chanting them. I looked at my son, standing proudly with his bride, smiling for the cameras, and I wanted to scream. I wanted to cry out his name, to remind him that I was his mother, that I had walked through fire to get him to this very day. I wanted to ask him why he did not defend me, why he let me sit alone while strangers whispered about me. But I stayed silent. My pride would not let me beg. My pride told me to hold my head high, even when my heart was breaking. Every laugh, every glance, every whisper dug deeper. The shame was unbearable. I could feel my body shrinking into the chair, as if the weight of their judgment was pushing me down. And yet, a part of me refused to break in front of them. A part of me sat straighter, forcing my chin up, as though I would not give them the satisfaction of seeing me crumble. But inside, I was crumbling. Inside, I was screaming. Inside, I was asking myself the question no mother ever wants to face. How did I raise a son who would let this happen to me? And as the music played, as the celebration swirled around me, I realized that this humiliation was not just an accident, it was deliberate. I was being pushed aside, erased, made invisible on the very day I should have been honored. I closed my eyes for a moment, holding back the tears, telling myself that this pain would not last forever, that someday, somehow, the truth of this day would come back to haunt the people who were laughing while I was breaking. Just as I thought I could not endure another whisper, just as I felt my chest tighten with the weight of humiliation, I noticed movement in the corner of my eye. Someone was approaching, walking with steady steps, as though he knew exactly where he was going. A man, tall and neatly dressed, with an air of calm confidence, stopped by the lonely chair beside me. For a second I thought he might have lost his way, or perhaps mistaken the seat for someone else's, but instead he pulled it out and sat down without hesitation. My heart jumped, startled, because until that moment, not one person had chosen to sit near me. I had been left in the shadows, abandoned, forgotten. But now here was this stranger, sitting as though he belonged right there by my side. He did not look at me at first. He simply sat back, straightened his jacket, and glanced toward the front of the room where the ceremony was unfolding. Then, slowly, he leaned closer, his voice low, almost a whisper, but firm enough for me to catch every word. "Act like you're with me." My heart skipped so hard it felt as though it would leap from my chest. I blinked at him, unsure of what he meant, unsure of why he would say such a thing. But in that single moment, something inside me shifted. For the first time that day, I felt a wave of comfort, a strange and unexpected warmth, as though someone had reached through the fog of humiliation and handed me a lifeline. I wanted to ask him what he meant. I wanted to ask him why, but I could not form the words. My voice caught in my throat, and all I could do was stare at him. His calm expression, his steady presence, his quiet confidence. It all felt so different from the chaos and cruelty swirling around me. He seemed to carry with him a kind of assurance, a silent message that said, "You are not alone anymore." I looked around quickly, wondering if people had noticed. They had. I saw heads turn, whispers begin again, but this time their tone was different. Instead of mocking me for sitting alone, they now looked curious, confused, even a little surprised. Their eyes darted from me to him and then back again. And for the first time that day, I felt something shift in the air. It was as though his presence had erased the loneliness around me. The pitying stares softened, the cruel curiosity dimmed. Where once I had been a target of whispers, now people glanced at me with new eyes, as if trying to understand who this man was and why he had chosen to sit beside me. I sat straighter, my hands still trembling slightly, but steadier now with him there. His words replayed in my head. "Act like you're with me." They were simple, but they carried weight. They carried protection. They carried dignity. And though I still did not understand why, I chose to obey. I folded my hands neatly in my lap, lifted my chin, and leaned just slightly in his direction, as if we had come together, as if I was not forgotten after all. The shame that had been burning inside me cooled just a little. The sting of whispers dulled. For the first time that day, I felt like I could breathe again. I did not know who he was, or why he had chosen me, but something told me that his presence was not an accident. Something told me that this stranger had appeared for a reason, and that my story was about to take a turn I never expected. The man leaned slightly closer, his voice calm and steady, introducing himself with a warm smile that instantly disarmed the tension in my chest. His tone carried no pity, no condescension, only genuine kindness, and it struck me because it had been so long since anyone had spoken to me like that. I told him my name quietly, still unsure, still watching the people around us, but when his eyes met mine, steady and respectful, I felt a small piece of the weight on my shoulders lift. He asked me if I was comfortable, if I wanted some water, as though I mattered, as though my presence here was not a mistake but a right. It had been hours since anyone had looked at me with such consideration, and for a moment I did not even know how to respond. I nodded, whispering, "Thank you," though the words felt small compared to the relief I felt just being acknowledged. Then he did something I never expected. He laughed softly at something happening at the front, made a small joke, and nudged me gently with his elbow as if we were old friends sharing a private moment. I could not help it. I laughed too, quietly, but it felt so freeing that I almost startled myself. My laughter had been buried all day beneath shame and loneliness, yet with one joke, he had pulled it out of me as though it had been waiting there all along. Others around us noticed. They turned their heads, surprised, watching me smile, watching me laugh. A woman at the table nearby leaned toward her husband and whispered something. But this time it was not cruel. It was curious, maybe even approving. Slowly, the stares that once cut me down began to change. Where there had been judgment, there was now hesitation. Where there had been whispers of shame, there were now whispers of questions. Who was this man sitting with me? Why was he treating me with such comfort? Why was I, the mother who had been shoved aside, now sitting with someone who made me look like I belonged? The stranger included me in conversations with those around us. He asked me what I thought of the decorations, what I thought of the music, things so simple yet so powerful because no one else had bothered to include me. He listened when I answered, nodding, smiling, making me feel that my words had weight. Soon, people nearby began to respond to me too, nodding in agreement, smiling politely, as if they suddenly remembered that I was more than just the outcast in the corner. For the first time since the day began, I felt seen. I was no longer the invisible figure hiding behind forced smiles. I was no longer the subject of cruel whispers. I was sitting beside someone who had given me a shield of kindness, a shield strong enough to make the eyes of others soften, strong enough to make me hold my head a little higher. I glanced at my son across the room. He was busy greeting guests, smiling for the cameras, not looking in my direction. But when his eyes finally swept the hall and landed on me, I saw something flicker in his expression. Confusion, maybe even surprise. Because the lonely mother he had left in the shadows was no longer sitting in disgrace. She was sitting upright, smiling, speaking with people, looking as though she belonged after all. That moment gave me a strange strength. I realized that maybe I did not need his acknowledgement to have dignity. Maybe my worth was not tied to the chair I was forced to sit in, or the whispers that tried to tear me apart. Maybe my worth was already mine, carried inside me, and the stranger beside me was simply helping me remember it. The room no longer felt like an enemy. The air no longer suffocated me with judgment. I could breathe again, and with every breath I grew stronger. The stranger never raised his voice, never demanded attention, but his quiet presence changed the way others looked at me, and in doing so, he gave me back something I thought I had lost forever. For the first time that day, I whispered to myself, maybe I am not as alone as I thought. Maybe this story is not finished yet. I sat there with the stranger beside me, his quiet presence wrapping around me like a shield, and for the first time that day, I felt the weight of shame lifting from my shoulders. My laughter had returned, my smile felt real, and my spirit was no longer crushed under the burden of isolation. At first, I thought it was only me who noticed the change, but soon I began to see it in the faces of others, in the way their eyes darted toward me, in the way conversations hushed when I looked in their direction. The bride's family, who had claimed the front rows as though they owned not just the wedding, but my son himself, began to shift uncomfortably in their seats. I saw the bride's mother glance back, her perfectly painted lips tightening as her eyes landed on me. She had expected me to sit small and invisible, broken in my lonely corner. Instead, she saw me smiling, leaning in to speak to the man beside me, laughing softly at his words, nodding as though I belonged here more than anyone else. Her smug expression faltered, just for a second, but it was enough. I caught it. The way her eyes narrowed, the way her shoulders stiffened, the way she whispered urgently to the woman beside her. That was when I knew something had shifted. Their plan, carefully woven with cruelty and exclusion, was slipping apart, thread by thread. I could almost feel the ripple of unease moving through them. One of the bride's sisters turned her head, eyes sharp with curiosity, as if trying to understand who this man beside me was and why he had dared to treat me with such warmth. Another relative leaned forward, whispering something that made the bride's father glance back, his face a mask of irritation he struggled to hide. I held his gaze for a moment. steady and unflinching, and for the first time all day, I felt the balance of power shift. It was strange, almost surreal. For hours I had been invisible, an afterthought, a burden to be hidden in the shadows. Now, without raising my voice or demanding a place at the table, I was being seen again, and not as a figure of pity, but as a mother who carried dignity in her silence, as a woman who had found strength even when surrounded by scorn. The stranger leaned closer, his voice low but steady, asking me if I was all right. I nodded, but my eyes were locked on the faces of the family that had worked so hard to erase me. They could not hide their discomfort. They could not hide their frustration. The harder they tried to make me invisible, the brighter I seemed to shine simply because I refused to crumble. I watched the bride herself glance back once, her smile flickering ever so slightly when she saw me. It was only for a moment, but in that moment I realized she had not expected this. She had not expected me to find comfort, to find strength, to find someone who would sit beside me and make the whispers lose their power. She had thought she had won, thought she had silenced me forever, but now she looked uncertain, as though the story was changing right before her eyes. People began to treat me differently too. A guest I barely knew leaned over with a polite smile, commenting on how lovely the ceremony looked. Another nodded in my direction as he passed by, as though acknowledging me for the first time. They might not have realized it, but the stranger's presence had forced them to reconsider me, forced them to wonder why I had been left alone, and why I now carried myself with such quiet dignity. The hall no longer felt like a battlefield I was losing. It felt like a stage where the truth was slowly, inevitably, coming to light. The bride's family shifted in their seats, uncomfortable, restless, their smugness cracking like fragile glass under the weight of something they could not control. And me, the mother they tried to erase, sat taller in my chair, my heart steady, my soul refusing to bow. For the first time since I walked into that room, I felt the tide turning. This was the moment I realized that even in silence, even in stillness, I had a strength they could not take away. This was the turning point, the moment their cruelty began to unravel, the moment I understood that no matter what they did, the truth of who I was could not be erased. For the first time that day, my son's eyes found mine. It was fleeting, almost accidental, as though he had not intended to look in my direction. But when our gazes locked across the crowded room, the air around me shifted. My breath caught in my chest, and for a brief, trembling moment, it was only the two of us, mother and son, the way it had always been, the way it was supposed to be on this day that marked such a milestone in his life. His eyes carried something I could not ignore. It was not joy, not pride, not the radiant happiness a groom should have when surrounded by love and celebration. Instead, it was heavy. There was conflict, unease, and just beneath the surface, something that looked painfully like guilt. He opened his mouth slightly, as if he might say something, as if words might travel across the distance between us, words meant only for me. But then, like a man bound by invisible chains, he turned away, his jaw tight, his expression swallowed by the performance he was forced to uphold. I sat there, my heart twisting, because in that glance I had seen him, truly seen him, stripped of the act he was putting on for the world. I knew that look. I had seen it before in the quiet corners of our home, when he was a boy trying to hide his tears after losing a game at school, or when he felt guilty for saying something sharp in his teenage years. It was the look of a soul divided between what it wanted and what it was told it must endure. I wanted to rise then. I wanted to walk across the room, to take his hand, to remind him that I was there, that I had always been there, that no matter how far the bride's family tried to push me away, my love for him could not be silenced. But I stayed seated, my fingers clutching the edge of my chair, because I knew the eyes of many were watching. They would twist my love into something ugly. They would call it disruption. They would brand me selfish, and I could not give them more weapons to use against me. Still, that glance told me everything. My son was not blind to what was happening. He saw me. He saw where I was sitting, alone, excluded, diminished. He knew it was wrong. The guilt in his eyes was proof enough. Yet he could not, or would not, rise above it. Perhaps he was afraid of appearances. Perhaps he was afraid of his wife. Or perhaps he was afraid of what it might mean to stand against the very people who had woven themselves so tightly around him. The stranger beside me noticed too. He leaned slightly closer, his voice barely above a whisper as he asked, "That's your son, isn't it?" I nodded, unable to speak, because my throat felt tight with all the emotions I was holding back. Pride, sorrow, love, hurt. They were all tangled together, making my chest ache. It was only a glance, yet it was everything. A silent confession, a wordless apology, a fleeting reminder that beneath the weight of expectations and appearances, he was still my son, the same boy who once clung to me when thunder shook the skies, the same boy who once promised that no matter what, he would always take care of me. And though he looked away quickly, choosing silence over action, I held on to that moment. I let it root itself deep inside me, a reminder that even when he seemed lost to me, even when others tried to erase me, his heart still knew me. I sat taller, steadier, refusing to let the pain of his retreat undo me. Because for the first time that day, I had seen the truth written in his eyes. He was not as free as he pretended to be. He was not as distant as they wanted me to believe. My son's glance, brief as it was, reminded me that the bond between us had not been broken, only buried. And buried things, if given time, always rise again. When the ceremony ended and the guests began to drift toward the reception hall, I braced myself for another round of isolation. I could already see the bride's family gathering like a wall, their laughter filling the air, their eyes glancing at me as if I were nothing more than a burden who had somehow slipped past the guards at the door. I clutched my small purse, my heart heavy, preparing myself to walk in alone and find another corner where I could disappear. But before I could take that lonely step, the stranger at my side placed a steady hand on my arm. He smiled, easy and warm, the kind of smile that disarms before you even know it. "Come with me," he said softly, as though it were the most natural thing in the world, and without giving me time to retreat into doubt, he guided me forward. Inside the reception hall, music floated through the air, tables glittered with candles, and the smell of food teased the senses. The bride's family moved with a sense of ownership, directing guests here and there, ensuring everyone saw them at the center. I saw one of the ushers glance at me, ready perhaps to steer me toward the edges again. But before he could speak, the stranger announced my presence in a voice calm yet firm. "She is with me." Those words cut through the air. Heads turned. The usher blinked, then nodded, stepping back. It was a small victory, but in that moment, it felt enormous. We moved through the room together, and for the first time that day, I did not feel invisible. He introduced me to people I had never met before, speaking as if I belonged. "This is my companion for the evening," he said with a smile, and though I knew he was no true companion of mine, I felt something bloom inside me that I had not felt in years. Dignity, respect, presence. I laughed when he joked. I nodded when he spoke of things light and easy. People around us smiled too, some joining in the conversation, others looking at me with curiosity. No one dared to ask why the groom's mother was seated alone anymore. The whispers that had once stung my ears began to quiet, replaced by the hum of ordinary talk, as if I were just another honored guest at the celebration. I saw the bride's family notice. Their expressions flickered. the smugness faltering ever so slightly. They had expected me to remain small, hidden, humiliated. But here I was, standing taller, speaking, laughing, seen. I watched one of the bride's aunts lean close to whisper into another's ear, her eyes darting toward me, her brows knit in irritation. Their little plan to erase me was unraveling, thread by thread, undone not by confrontation, but by the quiet strength of a stranger who refused to let me be invisible. My son passed by at one point, his arm linked with his new wife's. She smiled widely, too widely, her face painted with triumph. But when her eyes fell on me, standing there with my head high and my shoulders back, her smile faltered, just slightly, a crack in the perfect mask. My son's gaze lingered again, soft, unsure, but once more looked away. Still, I knew he had seen me, and he had seen that I was not broken. As the music swelled and the room filled with celebration, I felt something shift deep inside me. I'd come expecting rejection, prepared to endure humiliation, resigned to pain. But now, I was reminded that dignity is not something others can strip away unless I hand it to them willingly. The stranger leaned toward me again and whispered, "You belong here just as much as anyone else. Don't forget that." His words settled into me like a balm on a wound, and for the first time that day, I allowed myself to breathe without the weight of shame pressing against my chest. I stood taller, my smile real now, not forced. I was no longer the lonely mother tucked away in a corner. I was here, seen, respected, and no one could take that from me. All through the reception, I felt steadier than I had in years. The stranger's presence was like a shield, a quiet reminder that I was not as powerless as they wanted me to believe. Yet in the back of my mind, a question stirred, one I could no longer ignore. Who was this man, really, and why had he chosen me? When the noise of the crowd dimmed a little and people moved toward the dance floor, I leaned closer to him. My voice was low, careful, but filled with the weight of the question that had sat heavy on my heart. "Why are you helping me?" I asked. "You don't even know me." He looked at me, his expression calm, almost solemn, as though he had been expecting this moment. His smile softened, no longer playful but sincere. "I do not need to know you to see what is happening," he said quietly. "I saw you pushed aside. I saw the way they tried to humiliate you. I saw how your son hesitated and stayed silent, and I could not stand by. I have watched the bride's family long enough. They act as though this wedding belongs only to them, as if your presence does not matter. But you are his mother. You matter most of all." My breath caught. There was something in his voice that carried conviction, a firmness that could not be faked. "But why you?" I whispered again. "Why do you care?" He paused, then leaned even closer, lowering his tone so only I could hear. "Because I am connected to them, not directly, but enough. I know their ways, their pride, their cruelty. I was invited here as an acquaintance, but I have watched quietly from the edges, and when I saw them shove you into a lonely chair, I decided I would not stay silent. I will not let cruelty win, not today." His words struck me like a bell. Connected to them, part of their circle, yet standing against them for my sake. I looked at him differently then, not just as a stranger who had offered kindness, but as a man willing to risk his standing to restore mine. "Thank you," I whispered, my voice breaking under the weight of the emotions I had held back all day. My eyes burned and I blinked hard, unwilling to let tears fall in front of the people who still watched from across the room. But inside, I felt something shift. For once, I was not standing alone. He nodded, his smile faint but steady. "You do not need to thank me. Dignity is not something anyone should be forced to give up. They thought they could take it from you. I only reminded them that they could not. I sat in silence for a long moment, letting his words settle, letting them breathe life back into the parts of me that had been crushed when I was first led to that lonely chair. And for the first time that day, I believed again that perhaps I had a place here, that perhaps no matter how hard they tried, they could not erase me from the life I had built with my son. If you are still with me in this story, I want you to take a moment to think about the power of kindness. One stranger, one act of courage, can change everything. If you believe in standing up against cruelty, please like this video, share it so others can hear this story, and subscribe to the channel for more stories that remind us of hope and dignity. And tell me in the comments, have you ever had someone step in for you when you felt alone? Or have you ever been that person for someone else? I would love to hear your story too. The music had slowed, the laughter had softened, and the hall was beginning to empty as the night wore on. I sat still at my table, my gift unopened beside me, my hands folded tightly in my lap, as if holding myself together. The stranger had stepped away for a moment, leaving me in a quiet bubble I had not felt all day. That was when I saw him, my son, walking toward me with a face I had not seen since he was a boy. Pale, troubled, heavy with something he could no longer hide. He stopped in front of me, hesitant, his eyes darting as though the weight of the entire evening was crushing him. For a long moment he said nothing, and I just stared, waiting, my chest tight. Then he lowered his voice, soft enough that only I could hear. "Mom," he said, and the sound of it cracked something inside me. "I am sorry." I blinked at him, stunned. He swallowed hard, his hands tightening at his sides, and then the words began to pour out, raw and broken. "I let this happen. I let them push you aside. I let her family run everything. I thought keeping quiet would keep the peace. I thought giving in would make her happy, but it only made me weak. I should have spoken up. I should have told them you are my mother and you deserve respect, but I didn't, and I am ashamed of myself." His voice trembled, but his eyes, though wet, stayed locked on mine. I felt my heart twisting, torn between pain and the love that had always lived inside me for this boy I had raised. For so long, I had waited for him to see, to understand the wound that his silence had carved into me. And now here he was, finally admitting what I had known all along, that fear had chained him, that pride and pressure had blinded him. "Do you know what it felt like?" I asked softly, my own voice shaking, "to walk into this wedding and be treated like a stranger, to sit alone while everyone else laughed, while you stood there and said nothing." He lowered his head, his shoulders sagging. "I know," he whispered. "I saw it, I felt it, but I froze. I told myself it would be easier to let it happen than to fight, and now I see what I did. I see how I hurt you. Mom, I am so sorry. I never wanted this. I never wanted you to feel unwanted." My eyes stung, tears slipping before I could stop them. For years I had carried the image of him as a boy, holding my hand, promising me with innocent eyes that he would always protect me, always stand by me. And tonight, I had thought that boy was gone forever. But now, looking at him broken, ashamed, I realized he was still there, buried under the weight of choices and fears. I reached for his hand, my fingers trembling as I held it tightly. "You are my son," I whispered, "and I will always love you. But love does not mean I will forget. You must learn, you must grow, and you must never let fear silence you again. Not for me, not for yourself." He nodded, his lips pressing together as if sealing a vow. "I will," he said, his voice firmer now. "I promise you, I will never let this happen again." I squeezed his hand once more, letting the silence linger between us, heavy but healing. For the first time that night, I saw in his eyes the spark of the boy I once knew, the son I had raised, not perfect, but still mine. And as he stood there, pale and ashamed, I realized that maybe this night was not just about my humiliation. Maybe it was the beginning of his awakening too. I had barely let go of my son's hand when I felt the air in the room change, a sharpness that cut through the music and chatter. I turned my head and saw her, the bride, standing just a few steps away. Her face was tight with rage, her perfect smile gone, her eyes narrowing like knives as she watched us. She moved quickly, her heels striking the floor like thunder. Guests began to notice, heads turning as her voice rose, sharp and unsteady. "What are you doing?" she snapped at my son, her words trembling with anger. "Why are you sitting here with her, whispering like this, making a scene?" My son stiffened, caught between fear and defiance. He opened his mouth, but she didn't let him speak. She turned her glare on me, her voice loud enough now for half the room to hear. "I told you this day was about us, not about you. You always find a way to make everything about yourself, don't you?" The words hit me like blows, each one sharper than the last, but before I could answer, my son stood, his voice breaking through hers. "Stop," he said firmly, his tone carrying further than she expected. A hush fell over the nearest tables, guests leaning in, whispers rising. Her face paled at the sound of his defiance, but her anger only grew. "Don't you dare embarrass me in front of everyone," she hissed, her voice shaking. "Do you know what they'll think? Do you know what you're doing to me?" People were staring now, their eyes wide, the murmurs spreading like wildfire. The perfect picture she had painted, the flawless bride she had pretended to be, was cracking before them all. My son lifted his chin, his hand balling into a fist at his side. "This is not about embarrassing you," he said, his voice strong though his hands trembled. "This is about respect. You disrespected my mother. You disrespected me. And I am done letting you and your family control everything." Gasps filled the air. A few guests shifted uncomfortably. Others leaned closer, eager to catch every word. I could feel the weight of 100 eyes pressing down on us. But for the first time all night, I did not bow my head. The bride's face twisted with fury, her voice cracking as she tried to regain her grip on the moment. "You ungrateful," she began. But the words caught in her throat as the whispers around her grew louder, judging, questioning. Her perfect image, the flawless bride who had orchestrated every detail, was slipping from her grasp. Her hands shook as she grabbed his arm, but he pulled back, his voice steady, final. "No more," he said, and the sound of it was like a door slamming shut. All around us, the room buzzed with shock, with disbelief, with whispers that spread like cracks in glass. Her fury was laid bare, her mask ripped away in front of everyone who mattered to her. And in that moment, I realized the power of truth. It only takes a single spark of courage to burn through even the strongest lies. For most of that day, I had been a shadow, tucked away in the corner, treated like I did not exist. But now, as the music swelled again and the whispers about the bride's outburst rippled across the room, I felt something shift. The eyes that had once slid past me now sought me out. People began to approach, not with pity or suspicion, but with warmth. A woman I barely knew, one of the bride's relatives, came forward first. She touched my arm gently and said, "You don't deserve what happened earlier. You are his mother, and you should have been honored from the start." Her voice was kind, her eyes soft, and I felt my chest loosen for the first time that evening. Others followed. Guests who had whispered before now asked about me, about my son, about the life we had shared before this day. They listened when I spoke. They nodded. They smiled, as if I had finally been seen. With every kind word, with every gesture of respect, A little of the shame that had clung to me began to melt away. And then came the moment I never thought I would live to see. My son took my hand, gently but firmly, and led me onto the dance floor. The music wrapped around us, the lights shimmering softly, and for a brief time it was just the two of us again, like when he was a boy, and I held him close through storms and sleepless nights. He whispered, "I should have done this sooner. Forgive me." I nodded, tears slipping silently down my cheeks, but this time they were not from humiliation. They were from relief, from love, from being seen, finally, for who I was and what I had given. We danced slowly, and then we laughed, truly laughed, as the weight between us eased. The crowd watched, some clapping, some joining in, and I realized I was no longer invisible. I was no longer the mother sitting in the corner. I was back in my rightful place, by my son's side. Across the room, I caught sight of the stranger. He stood quietly, hands in his pockets, watching with a faint smile on his face. He did not move toward me, did not demand attention. His presence alone, steady and calm, was enough. He had given me back my dignity, and now he was letting me shine on my own. I held my son's hand tightly, refusing to let go. For so long I had carried the fear that I had lost him forever, that the bond we once shared was gone. But now, as we moved together, step by step, I knew that no matter what battle still lay ahead, no one could erase what we were to each other. And in that moment, I felt whole again. When the music faded and the last guest began to leave, I remained seated for a moment, holding my breath as though I wanted to trap the air of that evening inside my chest forever. The night had been long, filled with humiliation, whispers, pain, and then against all odds, healing. What had begun as the darkest day of my life had ended with a light I had not expected. I looked around the hall at the empty chairs and the scattered flower petals on the floor, and I thought about everything that had happened. I had walked into this wedding with joy in my heart and hope in my eyes, only to be shoved to the side, silenced, erased as if my years of sacrifice meant nothing. They tried to bury me in shame, to make me feel like I was less than what I truly was. For a while, I had believed them. I had sat in that lonely chair, swallowing my tears, convincing myself that maybe this was my place, but it wasn't. It never was. Because that night proved something I had almost forgotten. No one can erase the truth. I carried my son in my womb, I carried him in my arms, and I carried him through storms when his father left this earth too soon. I worked when I was exhausted. I gave when I had nothing left to give. I loved when it was the only strength I had left. And even though he faltered, even though he let fear and influence cloud his judgment, the bond we shared still lived. It had only been waiting for the right moment to rise again. And rise, it did. The stranger's voice echoed in my mind. Act like you're with me. Those simple words had shifted everything. They reminded me that I was not powerless, that kindness still exists, that sometimes even in the worst moments of life, someone unexpected will extend a hand and say, "You matter." I wiped my tears as I realized that night had given me more than just a restored seat at a wedding. It had given me clarity. It had shown me who truly saw me, who valued me, and who tried to silence me. The masks had slipped, the performances had cracked, and the truth stood in the open for everyone to see. And dear reader, if you are listening to my story, I want you to remember this. Never let anyone erase you. Never let anyone convince you that your love, your sacrifice, your worth is disposable. If my words touch you, if you see pieces of yourself in me, then pause for a moment. Like, share, and comment below. Because your voice deserves to be heard too. None of us should be made to sit alone in silence. As I stood to leave the hall, My son walked beside me, his head bowed in shame, yet his hand clutching mine tightly, as if he feared letting go again. I did not need his perfect words, only his presence, only the truth in his eyes that said, "I see you now, Mom." And that was enough. The night had not broken me. No, it had revealed the truth. And as I stepped out into the cool night air, the closing words formed quietly in my heart, words I will never forget. A mother may be pushed aside, but she can never be erased. As I sit back now and reflect, the memories of that day still move through me slowly, sometimes like a storm, sometimes like a quiet breeze, but always with weight. I think about betrayal, about the kind of betrayal that cuts deeper than a knife, the kind that comes not from strangers but from those who should stand closest to you. I think about dignity, how easily it can be stolen when others decide to paint you invisible, how quickly it can crumble when people whisper about you as if you are not even there. Yet I also think about kindness, about the way one stranger with steady eyes and gentle words changed everything for me. His presence became my shield, his voice became my anchor, his kindness became a reminder that I was never powerless, not even in the darkest corner of that wedding hall. Betrayal tried to erase me, but dignity stood up again. Shame tried to bury me, but truth rose like fire through the ashes. The bride's family thought their control was absolute, but their power melted the moment someone decided to show me compassion, the moment someone chose not to remain silent. And my son who had faltered and allowed fear to hold him, finally saw the truth too. That night did not destroy me. Instead, it revealed something that can never be broken: a mother's worth, a mother's love, and the simple fact that the truth cannot be silenced forever. There will always be people who try to push you aside, people who believe they can write you out of your own story, people who smile smugly while tearing down everything you built with sacrifice and love. They may succeed for a while. They may laugh as you sit alone. They may whisper as you pretend not to hear. But hear me clearly. The truth will always rise. The truth may take time. It may wait in silence. But when it shows itself, it breaks every chain. It shatters every mask. It restores what was stolen. And to you who are listening, maybe you know what it feels like. Maybe you have sat alone at a table where you should have been honored. Maybe you have been excluded, silenced, ignored, made to feel like you are nothing. If that is you, let my story remind you, you are not nothing. You are not invisible. You are not erased. Your dignity may be tested, but it still belongs to you. Your voice may tremble, but it is still yours to speak. Your love may be mocked, but it is still stronger than any lie. So I ask you now, do not let this moment pass in silence. If my story touched your heart, if it reminded you of your own scars, if it gave you strength to stand taller, then do something with it. Like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear that the truth will always rise. Subscribe so you never miss stories like this one. And please, leave a comment below. Tell me, have you ever been excluded when you should have belonged? Have you ever been betrayed by the very people who should have lifted you? Have you ever felt invisible until kindness found you again? Your story matters, your voice matters, and together we can remind the world that silence will never win. Because in the end, betrayal fades, dignity restores, kindness endures, and truth always rises.